We'll start with Dr. Einat Albin, the academic director of the Minerva Center for Human Rights in Jerusalem. This is a co-production of the center's two branches in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Einat will speak, and then Michal Hos, who's one of the three co-organizers, will tell us what the conference is actually about.
So good morning, everyone. Lovely meeting you. My name is Einat Albin, and I welcome you here to Tentur. I just entered this place in the morning, and it's like an oasis of the extensive reality that occurs outside. You drive on the street, you see a lot of infrastructure work done on the streets in East Jerusalem, showing the complexity of the place. You go outside to the balcony, you see the separation wall, and in between we are here with our academic discussions today. But the idea of this morning and the day, the entire day itself, is to talk about the complexity which actually lies outside this place of oasis, the complex situation of Jerusalem and East Jerusalem in particular, that entails layers of difficulties that we have to address that make the entire question of transitional justice within this area much more complex than in any other location perhaps around the world. Here in East Jerusalem, in Jerusalem generally, I think the tension comes to its peak, where you think about issues of transitional justice that occur in other areas of conflict. The layers that are added into Jerusalem with issues regarding religion, with issues regarding nationalist ideologies, with issues concerning status, legal status, they express, each one of them express the tension on different levels than we can assume and learn from other places. This day is part of an initiative that we decided on together last year, that in addition to an international conference that both centers, the Tel Aviv, the Hebrew University, organize on transitional justice, we dedicate an entire day to the local sphere of Israel. Last year we did it in the city of Lod. This year we're doing it here in Jerusalem. And the idea is double. First of all, to take the themes of the international context and discuss them more particularly on the local level and see how within local realities of Israel these issues have their own meaning, space, interaction, tensions. In our conference today, we're talking about third parties, non-state actors that are involved in the processes of transitional justice, either as groups that push towards traditional justice or take part in the conflict itself. This is a very complex situation that we address here. How is it particularly addressed in the sphere of East Jerusalem? The other idea of holding this local day is also to create a community of scholars within Israel that work on issues of transitional justice that is interdisciplinary and brings together people to discuss these very important topics. Before I turn the stage to Michal, I want to say that both centers, the Tel Aviv branch of the Minerva Center for Human Rights and the Jerusalem branch of the Minerva Center for Human Rights, focus in the past several years on the theme of transitional justice. We have the joint annual conference that we do together, and we also have a joint postdoctoral fellowship. And this year we were particularly, I think, blessed with three excellent postdoc it's not students really, scholars, postdoc scholars that were involved in both centers, Uri, Michal, and Chagit, who also organized this day. And I want to take this opportunity and thank them for being involved in our centers, for working wonderfully together, for creating your own special group of really excellent and brilliant people that talked about transitional justice having also mutual interest in the subject. We were, I think, both center very happy that you were with us this year, and this event is the peak of your postdoc scholarship. So thank you a lot, and thank you also to all organizers and to the partnership with Tel Aviv and to the Minerva Center at Jerusalem staff for doing all the logistics, Dani, Michal, Nufit, and Yulia, and have a wonderful day. Thanks a lot.
Hi everyone, it's really great to see all of you here today, and thank you for joining us. So as Einat mentioned, following a very fruitful international conference concerning the roles of non-state actors as objects and agents in transitional justice processes, we have gathered here today with leading scholars, activists, and civil society organizations to extend the debate to the local urban field and the Israel-Palestine context. Discussing transitional justice amid an ongoing asymmetrical conflict and in the absence of peace negotiations or a government-initiated process of repair and accountability brings about distinct challenges and requires us to adopt new contexts, scales, and temporalities. We will consider how the city of Jerusalem, with its municipality, planning bodies, religious institution, and unequal infrastructure, bears responsibility for perpetuating human rights abuse and injustice, but also how the city creates the conditions for the emergence of community-based work and civic agency that can advance accountability and repair, despite hegemonic counterforces. I would like to thank all our wonderful speakers for joining us today, and to Hagit and Uri, fellows of the Minerva Center's Transitional Justice postdoctoral program, as Einat mentioned, that organized this event together with me. I would also like to thank Dani Evron, Executive Director of the Minerva Center for Human Rights at the Hebrew University, Einat Albin, our Academic Director, and the staff at the center, Nofit, Yulia, and Michal, for all their help with planning this event. I'd also like to thank Yulia Litov and Liora Baliski, the Director of the Minerva Center for Human Rights in the Tel Aviv branch. So I hope we're going to have a very fruitful day today, and let's begin.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, we're small. So I'm happy to launch the first panel of this really important and great conference. And the panel is about spatial justice and planning from below in Eastern Jerusalem. And I have to say that as a geographer, I'm very happy to hear the term Eastern, because as we all know that East Jerusalem is not a very accurate term geographically, so thank you for that. We have three speakers today who are all also colleagues and know each other very well, and the lecturers also speak with one another. So I'm happy to present the first speaker, Dr. Michal Breyer, who is an architect and urban planner who specializes in urban political geography. Michal is a postdoctoral fellow at the Truman Institute at the Hebrew University, and also a research and teaching fellow at the Urban Clinic, also at the Hebrew University, where she's the head of planning. In her free time, Michal, I don't know how you still have free time, Michal serves as a chairperson of the human rights organization BIMCOM, Planners for Planning Rights. So please join us. Are we doing it speaker by speaker, or should we all join the speaker by speaker?
No, I don't.
Okay. We're here.
Maybe you want to introduce the speakers so they will see with them.
Okay. Sorry, second speaker is Sari Konish, who is also an architect and urban planner, and she heads the East Jerusalem department at BIMCOM, Planners for Planning Rights, an Israeli NGO that Michal is co-chairing, that focuses on the intersection between human rights and urban planning. So Sari, good morning. And our third speaker is Aviv Tatarsky. He's an activist in the occupied territories and researcher for the Israeli NGO Iramim, which advocates for Palestinian rights in Jerusalem.
Maybe the speakers can speak from the podium.
Yeah. So we have, Michal, you have 15 minutes. Okay. I will be speaking. So we have some time for questions.
Oops. Wait. That's Sari's. רגע. Estabachti.
Go to the first slide, or you want to turn it off?
I want to go to the first slide, but I'm not sure if I'm going.
No, that one. You just missed it.
This one?
No, that's the last one. I went there all.
I wasn't expecting the computer.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. So I'll just start. So just to say a few words about this panel, we thought about it together with Hagit, and I'm going to make a sort of theoretical introduction. I don't know if this is too strong. No, that's fine. Okay. About the relationship between transitional justice and urban planning, and with a sort of suggestion of how we can think about these two, at least in the literature, mostly detached fields. And then Sara and Aviv will present two specific case studies, which I'm not going to talk about, but I'm referring to them just very generally. And we'll give you all the details, and I think we can have a discussion after that, I hope. Okay, so by way of introduction to the two presentations that will follow me, my presentation seeks to explore the potential contribution of the field of urban planning and development to mobilizing reparative justice processes. My suggestion here is that we adopt a pre-transitional justice approach when we examine the recent shifts in Israeli policies of planning and development in Palestinian East Jerusalem. So my main question is, how might planning and development tools, methods, and knowledge provide new avenues for initiating reparative justice processes by creating bottom-up models of reparations that operate on an urban scale? So reparative justice is an approach focused, can I close this? I'm going to close this, okay? It's easier. Reparative justice is an approach that focuses on processes of collecting and devising an appropriate justice response to victims of conflict, violence, and oppression within a context of transitioning from conflict to peace. The particular focus of reparative justice is on the different forms of acknowledging and repairing past harms, both politically and financially. In this presentation, I follow Loren Balasco, who suggests a conceptual framework of reparative development as a way of broadening our thinking about how to make reparation programs more effective mechanisms in improving a society's prospects for development and for democracy. So similar to reparative justice, reparative development is a victim-centered approach. Reparations are primarily aimed at restoring victims' dignity, moral worth, and civic status. They are designed to eliminate social exclusion and economic marginalization that stem from conflict. Reparative development emphasizes reparations as more than just remedies for the past abuses. It sees reparations as forward-looking programs, which aim to address and to redress lost life opportunities of individuals, of communities, and of society as a whole. So this is the first link maybe to urban planning, which is also a forward-looking operation. A key element in recognizing that conflict harms individuals, but these individuals are embedded in communities, which are equally in need of reparations. So this is one lacune in the reparative justice, that it's mostly about individuals, maybe about families, but much less about community and society. And I think this is, again, something that urban planning brings to the table. Therefore, we need to devise programs which work on a collective level as well as on an individual. So if we begin looking at Jerusalem and Quds, and we acknowledge the pervasive unequal power relations that actually shape the urban structure, of course we cannot talk about transitional justice in the more conventional post-conflict sense. So we must, as Einat already said, make an effort to think about pre-transitional justice, meaning that we need to devise strategies that can be applied when active conflict is still ongoing. Such programs should work towards making the transition from cultural denial and continued harm to one of recognition and accountability to redress injustices. And exactly this context of pre-transitional justice is where reparative development comes in, I think, becomes useful. Reparative development is usually viewed as a springboard for post-conflict efforts of social integration and as a tool for addressing socioeconomic gaps that are the legacy of uneven power relations. However, in our context and in the context of pre-transitional justice, I'd like to turn this question on its head and to ask, under what conditions can planning and development effort spur reparation processes, serving as a vantage point for initiating pre-transitional processes? So to move into a more concrete analysis, I would like to focus our attention on the possibility to attain a suitable, safe, and affordable housing as a basic human right, and it's one of the main factors that determines these life opportunities. This right has been continually violated in Palestinian East Jerusalem since 1967. The current housing crisis that we're seeing in the city is a direct outcome of Israel's long-standing discriminatory planning and development tools and policies, utilizing boundaries, land use codes, building regulations, infrastructure distribution. All these were used to hinder Palestinian development, the development of the Palestinian neighborhoods, restricting and confining the Palestinian presence in the city, and condemning the residents to poverty and deprivation. Despite such limitations, the city's Palestinian community continues to grow. Facing the systematic attacks on their livelihoods, Palestinians have countered Israeli planning policies with widespread informal urban development. Whether we view this development as a tactic of survival or as a political resistance, it is clear that it can only give a very limited answer to the growing housing needs, and it completely lacks proper public amenities and infrastructure development and other crucial components of urban life. Today, it's estimated that about 50% of the Palestinian housing units are slated as illegal in the eyes of the Israeli authorities. This informal construction is met with harsh institutional violence, which includes lengthy and costly legal procedures, culminating in dozens of home demolitions every year. As a result, many residents live under permanent conditions of fear, and whole families are left deprived of basic shelter. Urban planning and urban violence become two sides of the same coin in this situation. So how can we move away from years of restriction and neglect in order to start the process of repairing lost life opportunities, to echo Balzasko's words? Is there a way to think about urban planning processes not as a tool of discrimination and violence, but rather use them as reparative means in order to decolonize urban practice? To do so, we should not wait for political transition to come around, because the urban harms and injuries that can be detected and also can be addressed right away. By working to repair and to restore lost life opportunities for individuals, families, and communities, our effort can actually move us towards creating necessary conditions for reconciliation. In this sense, reparative development efforts have the potential of spurring political change. In recent years, we can detect some new planning approaches in the city. Although these changes are very modest, I will argue that they indicate a shift in planning rationales. First, and the two case studies that we'll talk about, which are the village of Walaje and the neighborhood of Isawiya, I hope will demonstrate what I'm trying to show. Planning authorities are beginning to acknowledge informality as a given reality, one that force alone cannot dismantle. In both cases, we can detect a slow move away from the logic of elimination and replacement of informal construction towards facilitating formalization, whitening, if you will, of the existing urban development, and some opportunities for incremental development and renewal. What is important here is the recognition that they entail, acknowledging that the existing urban fabric is the departure point for any process of transformation. So urban informality becomes the basis out of which we carve a future picture of the city. Second, it's worth stressing that the extent to which these plans, especially the Issawiya plan, is structured around the idea of flexible implementation, allowing landlords to choose among multiple paths of development. Beyond the practical reasons why this is useful, I think this flexibility is important in terms of giving residents a stronger voice within decision-making processes and an opportunity for building the capacity of the local community, which in the long term can help communities take part in negotiations within the community and between the communities, between the residents and the state. These changes, however limited, are not an outcome, did not come out of nowhere. Rather, they are the outcome of sustained and persistent civil society efforts and community engagement in carving counter-hegemonic spatial knowledge. And of course, this is what Sari and Aviv will talk about the very important critical role of civil society initiatives that play an important role in shaping אוקיי, עכשיו שומעים? כן, מעולה. So civil society plays a crucial role in shaping and implementing appropriate and workable reparative development programs. If such planning efforts are to take seriously what I said in the beginning, the victim-centered approach, which aims to best fit the needs and the specific demands for justice of the community, then we must base it on local knowledge and on community desires. And again, here, civil society has a key role to play in how we access local knowledge, how we understand it, how we build it, and so forth. Another key element linking between transitional justice and reparative development is how to address unequal land access, which is a root cause of conflict here and in many other places. And usually it is addressed by land restitution measures and reforming land tenure systems in a more just direction. In the case of Jerusalem, we see that land access, ownership, and control persist to be one of the most conflictual issues. Palestinian land rights continue to be limited, abused, and threatened, and basically denying a full spatial recognition. Therefore, any attempt to push reparative development forward must address land justice issues, which are currently seriously missing from all the initiatives that we're seeing. So obviously one can argue that the changes I've pointed out are maybe only cosmetic rather than indicating a meaningful shift in planning sensibilities, and maybe my friends will argue exactly that. And I do not wish to make an overly optimistic argument about the ability to transform the deeply antagonistic power relationship. But I do suggest that it's worth thinking about these recent planning initiatives, not only in terms of their immediate successes and failures, but also their potential for devising reparative justice strategies. Although each of the elements that I've described can be pushed much further and have not reached their full potential yet, I think they offer some modest beginnings. And to realize this full potential, to contribute to transitional justice processes, we must expand our understanding of planning beyond the technical solutions for the physical environment into a more encompassing conception of the planning arena as a place where people can demand rights, can negotiate claims for recognition, for redistribution, and for participation. So I hope the next two presentations will make my things more concrete and less theoretical. Thank you.
I was asked to
Just let us do it. Okay.
we have to open the computer.
Yeah.
Just maybe for those who joined us late, this is architect and planner Sally Cornish from BIM.
Okay, thank you. Hi, good morning. Whoops, no good. Okay, I'll start.
Yeah.
Okay. So, thank you, Michal. I think that the theoretical introduction is very useful, especially for me. I'm so involved in the details all the time. It gives me some theoretical language to try to insert into how I think and work about these things. I'll just say that BIMCOM, Planners for Planning Rights, is an Israeli NGO that focuses on the intersection, the intersection between human rights and urban planning. We use a term called planning rights, which includes many of the human rights, obviously. BIMCOM works, I'm just going to say a few more sentences about the organization for those who don't know, since civil society is an important element of the discussion. We work in within the Green Line Israel, as well as in the occupied territories, in all of the areas that the State of Israel presumes to control. And we work in many strategies, but our main strategy is to work together with communities to bring their voice to the urban planning processes in various different ways. And I think the examples will bring that forward. My focus is on the East Jerusalem department. Our departments are geographic, so we have a department that works in the Nakab with Bedouin communities. We have a department that works in the West Bank, in Area C. We have a department that focuses more on the north, and we also have cross-sectional departments that work on inner cities, on mixed cities, which are called not mixed cities today, something else. On other issues that connect all the different departments.
No, it's just wireless and it's disconnected. So just a second.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'll dive into the introduction, and then just in time when I need to show something on the map, it'll show up. So it's all okay.
For sure.
No problem. So. I wanted to, I'm going to focus on, I was given a challenge to try to even compare maybe similarities, mostly differences between two case studies that BIMCOM is very involved in recent years, even decades. Isawiya, the neighborhood of Isawiya, and the village of Walaje. But before I delve into these two examples, just by way of sort of a little bit of connecting the two, and just to say that urban planning is, and Michal explained this well, is perhaps the main tool of the occupation in East Jerusalem, the tool that has perhaps the most results on the ground. And I would like to pose that it's also a very main way of change. And in the same way that it's been a tool for oppression, it can be a force for solution, or solution's a big word, so I'll use change. In both Isawiya and Walaje, so some things that, so I'm going to say some things that are true about both communities, and then I'll talk a little bit about each one separately, trying to use the same framework where a little bit of history, then the planning process in that location, and then the main obstacles still ahead for each community. But first, maybe the obvious similarity that doesn't need to now be said, but we'll say it anyway, so it's on the table, is the occupation, the fact that the discriminatory urban planning policies that Michal outlined are very much present in both communities. The outcome may be being different in terms of urban structure, and this is why we now call one community a former village, now a neighborhood, and another community and I'm using community a lot of times because of what Michal said. I really think that the communal aspects here are very important to stress. Obviously, each family, each individual experiences it first and foremost as a threat to their own life and to their home and their family. But overall, these are clearly communal threats. But we have a former village now, if you may, an urban slum, as opposed to a village that is still holding on to remaining a village more on the outskirts of the city. Both are located, one can say, on the outskirts of the city, but Isawiya has been more, if you will, integrated into the urban structure of Jerusalem that is basically segregation. So while it's integrated, it's also very much separate. Soon I'll be able to show this a little bit on the maps, but if not, Aviv will use my maps. One other thing that is very important to mention in terms of both communities is their relation to open space, okay? Open space in the city. Green zoning on the maps. Or national parks. Both communities, Isawiya and Walaje, have met in a very strong way. One of the main tools of the occupation in East Jerusalem, from a planning point of view, is the overuse of national parks in an urban context. Give me another city in the world that has so much space for national parks within the boundaries of the municipal borders. I haven't found one yet. So in Isawiya we have the national park, the Mount Scopa Slopes National Park, which is not yet a national park, but it's in planning for a very long time, and one of the major threats on the growth and the development of Isawiya as a real urban neighborhood, not an urban slum, is this national park. I'll talk about it more in the context of Isawiya. And in a similar way in Walaje, we have similar but different, of course. All of these comparisons, each place has its story, but we have a national park on Walaje lands in Jerusalem that was intended to appropriate Walaje lands and prevent Walaje from growing on its own lands in whichever way would be natural growth, maybe to continue to use land maybe to continue to use land for agriculture, or to slowly develop, to urbanize, but not in a forced way like in Isawiya. Okay. So we'll move right into, I went the wrong way, show these two places on the map. So you can see their relation to the center of the conflict, the old city, and you can see the relationship also to the green network, if you were, in Jerusalem, and the specific national parks that are blocking the development of both communities. But since I talked about that without the pictures, I'm going to jump forward. I'm going the wrong way again. Try to remember to use the right button. Okay, so Isawiya, like I said, history, planning, and obstacles for each community. Because I have a little time, I'm going to try to do it quickly. So I think another similarity for both communities is when people will tell you their story, they will never skip the information about how large the village lands were and how much they have left today. So I wanted to show this for both communities. You can see Isawiya. Today, inside Jerusalem, the pointer doesn't really work, so I might move a little. Today, inside Jerusalem, Isawiya has about 1,000 dunam for about 20,000 people. But the original village lands before the conflict, or before the state of Israel, were about 10,000 or 10,500 dunam. The purple is the historic historic. I'm going to do this a few times. So it's a test. What are we talking about? Historic Isawiya, and inside Jerusalem is what we talk about today. Okay, but This is Jerusalem, okay? And the blue is the plan that I will talk about. So even with the lands left inside Jerusalem, there has been much expropriation all around to basically ghettoize Issawiya, and the plan is about 1,000 dunam. The plan we're talking about, out of more than 10,000, and just to mention, this big blue line here is the E1 master plan, which has different stages, and we're not talking about E1, but just so you see how E1 is on much of Issawiya land. Now we're going to focus on Jerusalem. Okay, this is the area of Jerusalem. The main point I want to make, without going into all the details because that will take too long, is that Issawiya and Walajeh, to a certain degree, are mirror images of each other. So in Issawiya, what we see is perhaps over-planning. All right? It's a myth that Israel doesn't plan for Palestinians in East Jerusalem. There's extensive planning. We call it limiting a plan that is intended to limit. And so if planning is only limiting and not providing opportunities, then it's not really planning. It's a misuse of planning. You can see all of these lines. I wouldn't even try anybody to try to make sense out of all these lines, okay? But you can see that all these lines suggest over-planning and conflictual planning that is really intended to take over and control and not really provide. The most important line for Issawiya is the light blue line, which is the plan that is now actually almost is in final stages of approval, the plan that Michal mentioned. And so to go really quickly, I mean, I'll just point out maybe one or two other lines. The dark green line is the national park, which you see kind of crawls into Issawiya, not yet approved. We're still fighting that battle. But many other lines of expansion, for example, should this area be for Issawiya? This is from the Jerusalem 2000 outline plan, if some of you heard of it. Maybe this area would be allowed for the expansion of Issawiya, and you can see that the new plan sort of includes that expansion, but it's sort of a retroactive expansion in the sense that it's mostly already built up. I think the image speaks for itself in the sense of this conflicting overactivity. This is the new plan for Issawiya. I just wanted to put it out there. We won't try to analyze it and understand every detail, but I will say maybe just a few things about the plan. First, the positive, and then the problems. Okay, so first of all, this is a. Okay, I'll explain that in a minute. I was planning on doing that in the conclusion in terms of who initiates and who approves and all of that about both plans, but I'll answer in 1 second. But just to say that this is a plan that is a real precedent in terms of all the planning activity in East Jerusalem since 1967. Issawiya was lucky enough, I think, that a lot of times the identity of the urban planner is important, and lucky enough to have Ali Cohen working on this plan. This plan, first of all, has the word regularization, I'll say it in Hebrew, hasdara, in the plan for the first time since 1967. This is very important. So it's, while it might be on paper, this is also part of the conclusion, right? Implementation is a very big question, but also providing the opportunity, first of all, in theory, is important. So this plan, which is almost approved for the first time since 1967, allows the residents of Issawiya the possibility to regularize their homes. Every step forward, this is right, one step forward, a few steps back, every possibility comes also with a limitation. So the Issawiya residents at the moment have this window of opportunity for the next 4 years, or 4 years from the date that the plan is approved. They wanted it to be only 2 years. Part of our objection to the plan was that 2 years wasn't enough, so we got 2 more. I think a decade would have been at least appropriate. And in addition to this opportunity to regularize, there is quite a bit of flexibility in the plan in terms of future development, in terms of building rights, in terms of different tracks of development that the citizen, using the word citizen on purpose. Residents of Issawiya are not citizens, but the citizen in the real sense can choose what is appropriate, what is possible for their family, but people have to work together. This makes it a little difficult. The plan is divided into compounds, and there's a little bit of flexibility about changing the size of the compound. Also not enough. There should be more flexibility. But people have to work together in order so that urban planning also begins to talk about the public uses and not just about the regularization of the homes. Okay, the main obstacles that still lay ahead in terms for Issawiya, and then we move on to Walaja, and I'll just say that this is not a plan that Bimkom did, this is a plan that Ali Cohen did for the municipality. But that there is a lot of history, similar to how in Walaja there's a lot of history. The planning process for an alternative plan in Issawiya has been going on for years, and Bimkom actually initiated it, the initial planning process almost 2 decades ago already, and we didn't succeed in bringing the plan to fruition. But we did lay a lot of ideas that, luckily enough, Ali Cohen did take into consideration when this plan began to be promoted. What happened to our plan is that it was basically faced with the national park, and we were told that we couldn't expand to the south because there will be a national park there, and then the residents of Issawiya couldn't continue to promote on their own a plan that basically ghettoizes them. So we had to stop, and the municipality then came in to make a plan for Issawiya, a plan for the ghetto, but luckily a positive plan for the ghetto in some absurd terms. But one of the main obstacles, 5 more minutes, I want to say that I purposely did Issawiya first, because if I say very little about Walaja, you have the expert at the table, so I'm not worried. So I might just say a few sentences about Walaja in the end and show a few maps. But the main obstacles lying ahead for Issawiya are this ghettoization. In all of the objections, we continue to object to the boundary of the plan. The boundary of the plan is very limiting, where it's clear that to the south there is land reserve, and the question of this land reserve being a national park that is larger than the neighborhood itself is a very big question in terms of Issawiya. So this border between the neighborhood and the national park, or just a park south of Issawiya, is still a very big question as far as the residents are concerned. But this ghettoization is all around, and I'll just mention that if you see at the top left, there's still an unrecognized neighborhood. You see a few houses there, an unrecognized sub-neighborhood, an unrecognized section of Issawiya that was left out of the plan because they are too close to the settlement neighborhood of French Hill, just beyond, to the west. So now, to do the same thing quickly, just so you have a sense for Walaja, but with a lot less of the details, because Aviv will fill in the blanks for you. We have this same idea of the historic Walaja, where you can see this is the section that's inside Jerusalem today, but Walaja was even bigger than Issawiya, okay, 17,000 dunam, and we have, ironically, a similar sort of space. Here we're talking about 900 dunam in this enclave, and in Issawiya, if you remember, we were talking about 1,000. A very big difference is that we have about 1,000 people living on 900 dunam versus 20,000 in Issawiya living on 1,000 dunam, okay? So to get a scale, so this is the village of Issawiya. It's Freud, he's here. And Walaja, so that gives a sense, maybe just to mention that the original Walaja was in 1948, so the Walaja residents are refugees on their own land. Hold on, I think there'll be time. I need to finish Walaja in 3 minutes.
But just explain the difference between the historic and the current. Does this mean that people who were spread like in the entire historical area are now located only in a small area? Why is the history important?
So also in Issawiya, people people weren't spread. The way villages work are that you have a center of a village, and then you have agricultural land. People aren't spread everywhere. So that's exactly what I was just about to say, is that the original center of Wallaceh was actually here, where Oran and Aminadav are today, in 1948 Israel. And after 1948, Wallaceh residents became refugees, many of them in refugee camps or outside of Palestine, and some of which who had land in this area were able to remain and become refugees on their own land. So Wallaceh today is on historical Wallaceh land, but in the West Bank, which later became part Jerusalem, part West Bank. So we have Area B, Area C, and Jerusalem, and the separation barrier, and many, many complexities. And what we can see is that it's, Wallaceh is basically an enclave. Here you can see the national park very well. This is the Emek Rafaim National Park, and you can see all the settlement neighborhoods that grew on land that was expropriated from Wallaceh, if in Jerusalem or in the West Bank. So we have Gilo and Har Gilo, one in Jerusalem, one in the West Bank, on Wallaceh land. But the most important story is the planning story, obviously, and I'm going to go real fast forward here because I think Aviv will focus more on the planning process and how it took place. But I just want to show you the plan, okay? This is like a very exciting moment for us because we've been working on a plan for Wallaceh now in recent years. This is a very, very initial stage as opposed to the Isawiya one that's almost approved. This is a very initial stage. A major difference is that this is a plan that is being initiated and funded and promoted by the residents of Wallaceh with a lot of support and help. But we finally, that is all the people involved here, again, the identity of the planner being very important. Here the planner is Ayala Ronel, and she just submitted the plan for for prerequisite consideration, or what's called Tnei Saf, Hagasha Tnei Saf, for all of you who have heard that term. And we're now waiting for the next stage of planning, which is the bureaucratic stage of planning, which is going to be the back and forth negotiation with the planning committees. But this is a very, very important moment for Wallaceh because different than Isawiya, which had a plan, and then we are talking about making a more apt plan or an alternative plan, in Wallaceh was basically never on the map for Jerusalem. And there was never a plan, there was never even the basic recognition. So I think I can leave this for consideration. These are some of the numbers I threw out to look at them and to understand that we have two communities basically on the opposite ends of the spectrum experiencing the same discrimination. Maybe the most alarming piece of data in this whole story is, it's not going to work, is this one where per capita in Wallaceh versus Isawiya, you can see how Wallaceh has really been targeted in terms of actual demolitions. If we just look since 2016, which is an important moment because of a change in the planning and building law, we can see that per capita, Wallaceh is really targeted in terms of home demolitions. Handing it over to Aviv.
Zoning plan under occupation, is there such an error?
And I'll be speaking in Hebrew, okay? I apologize to the English speakers. עכשיו אפשר לסגור את זה בלי לעשות אסון? עדיף לא לסגור. אוקיי. לא נסגור בכלל, לא ניגע. בסדר, אז שלום ותודה רבה על ההזמנה. אז כמו ששרי כבר הזכירה, אני אדבר על המהלך מתרחש בוואלג'ה, ודווקא בגלל שאני רוצה לתאר, בואו נקרא לזה פתח לתקווה, אז אני אתחיל מלהגיד שכמו שכבר שמענו, כן, מדיניות התכנון או האפליה התכנונית במזרח ירושלים היא מדיניות מאוד מאוד פוגענית. הנזקים שהיא יוצרת הם עצומים, אנחנו מדברים אפילו רק על הריסות בתים. היא שיטתית, כלומר, לשנות אותה זה מאוד מאוד קשה, כי יש לה מטרות מאוד מאוד חשובות לצורך העניין, לישות הזאת, כן, למדינת ישראל. ושרי הזכירה שינוי במדיניות, 2016, אולי רק אני אגיד בקיצור על וואלג'ה, אני אדבר על אותו חלק שראינו במפה של שרי, החלק שסופח לירושלים של וואלג'ה, 800 דונם, סופח שטח יותר גדול, אבל השטח שכולל בתים הוא 800 דונם, חיים בו היום כ1,000 תושבים. ובגדול זוכים להתעלמות מוחלטת של הרשויות, חוץ מהתחום של הריסות הבתים. מצד אחד לא הוכנה שם תוכנית מתאר מאז 1967, זאת אומרת אי אפשר לקבל היתרי בנייה, ומי שכן בונים, הבנייה נחשבת לא חוקית, כל הבנייה מאז 1967, ושינוי החקיקה, המדיניות, ב-2016, תיקון 116 לחוק התכנון והבנייה, חוק קמיניץ, שבעצם הביא יחידת עקיפה מאוד מאוד אגרסיבית, נקראת הרשות לעקיפה במקרקעין, לפעול בוואלג'ה, ומאז בעצם, כן, אסון, משבר שמאיים על קיום הקהילה, מ-190 בתים פלוס מינוס שיש באזור הירושלמי של הכפר, 100 קיבלו צווי הריסה בתקופה של 6 שנים, מתוכם, כן, שרי כתבה את המספר, מעל 30 נהרסו, אוקיי, והיחידה הזו היא פועלת מאוד מאוד מהר, היא לא מפספסת, זה שיש עשרות בתים שעוד לא נרסו זה בגלל הליכים משפטיים, שבסופו של דבר נגמרים בזה שבנית בלי היתר, תנחומינו, אבל אנחנו מאשרים את ההריסה, אוקיי? ועל הרקע הזה משפחות בכפר הגישו עתירה בדרישה לתכנון. בעצם קהילת וואלג'ה הגישה כבר תוכנית מתאר לפני אולי 15, יותר מ-15 שנה. התוכנית הזו נדחתה בזמנו בשנת 2009 על בסיס טענה של שיקולים סביבתיים, שימור של שטחים פתוחים, הגנה על ערכי טבע, ולכן זה לא משנה תוכנית יותר טובה, פחות טובה, אין בכלל מקום לתכנון למגורים באזור הזה. והיה שם איזה משהו שכאילו אפשר לדרוש דיון נוסף, ועל רקע הזה התושבים הגישו עתירה. בית המשפט העליון ב-2018 מקפיא את ביצוע צווי ההריסה, ומתחילה התדיינות משפטית. וזה השלב שבו גם עמותות במקום וירמים, איפה שאני עובד, נכנסות לתמונה ומצטרפות למאמצים של הקהילה להגן על הבתים שלה. בגלל שאני רוצה להתמקד הבעיה היא הרי בעיה פוליטית. אוקיי, זה די ברור שהבעיה היא לא תכנונית ולא מקצועית ולא משפטית. הבעיה היא בעיה פוליטית. אני רוצה להתמקד בניסיונות שלנו להתמודד עם האתגר הפוליטי, ולכן אני משאיר הרבה חלקים חסרים בדיוק בסיפור המשפטי, בסיפור התכנוני, אבל זה הבסיס. ובתוך המציאות הזאת, כולל מה שאמרתי על השיטתיות והמכוונות של מניעת התכנון. אוקיי, אז היכולת של ארגוני זכויות אדם לפעול, גם במיוחד במציאות של ישראל היום, היא כמובן מאוד מוגבלת, כן, מן הסתם אני לא צריך לפרט על זה, אבל בצורה הכי תמציתית, אם אתה ארגון ביקורתי, בוודאי בתחום של זכויות אדם, בוודאי זכויות אדם של פלסטינים, לרשויות המדינה יש אפס סובלנות כלפיך, כאילו, תגיד מה שאתה רוצה, למי אכפת בכלל, מי בכלל רוצה לדבר איתך. בית המשפט עצמו ברמה המשפטית הוא לא זה שיכריח את המדינה לתכנן, בטח לא לתכנן בצורה הוגנת. ועדות התכנון עצמן, כאילו, תוכן התוכנית הכי טובה שלא תהיה, ועדות התכנון עצמן הן ועדות פוליטיות, וההחלטות שלהן מתקבלות לאור שיקולים של דמוגרפיה וקרקע וכך הלאה. אוקיי? ואז והלחץ הבינלאומי, ששוב אני מניח להרבה מאיתנו קופץ בראש, אפשר לחשוב על ח'אן אל-אחמר, אפשר לחשוב על שייח' ג'ראח, כן, אפשר לחשוב על משפחה של עמית שלי, שהיום ברובע המוסלמי, שהפינוי עלול חס וחלילה שלהם מהבית לקרות בכמה שבועות, אז בתנאים האלה הקהילה הבינלאומית הופכת למפתח שפונים אליו, אבל לחץ בינלאומי, אם הוא אפקטיבי, במקרה הכי טוב, הוא משיג אולי איזושהי עצירה, מניעה, הקפאה של הריסות. זה עלול להיות זמני, זה אף פעם לא כולל הסדרה, אף פעם לא, בוודאי לא תוכנית מתאר, אני לא מכיר מקרה שבדרך הזאת הושגה תוכנית מתאר. ובגלל שהבעיה היא פוליטית, והיא פוליטית במובן מסוים מקומית, אם מותר להגיד את המילה הזו, למרות שהיא מאוד לא מדויקת, אז מתבקש שנעשה אדבוקציה ברמה המקומית, ברמה הפנים-ישראלית, הירושלמית, וזה מביא אותנו לאיזושהי בעיה מאוד מאוד חריפה, שכאמור ארגוני זכויות האדם הם מודרים ושוליים מבחינת השפעה פוליטית. ויש ארגוני, ואז מה אנחנו יכולים לעשות? אנחנו יכולים למחות, אנחנו יכולים להפגין, אבל שוב, לא בהכרח חייבים, אין בהכרח מישהו שמאוד מאוד מתרגש מזה. ויש ארגוני חברה אזרחית, בירושלים אפילו ארגוני חברה אזרחית ככה מרשימים ומפוארים בירושלים, שדווקא כן עובדים עם רשויות, כן עובדים עם הממסד, כן יש להם השפעה, ואלה ארגונים מאוד מאוד זהירים. הם לא מתמודדים עם הסוגיות הקשות, ה-so called פוליטיות. הם לא מאתגרים את הממסד, שוב, בגלל שלממסד יש אפס סובלנות לאתגר. הם מגבילים את עצמם לגבולות גזרה ש-whatever, ראש העירייה, משרד ממשלתי כזה או אחר, הכתיבו. אוקיי? ואז אם אני מביא את כל זה לוואלג'ה, אוקיי? מי שאולי יכולים לעבוד ולשכנע ולהתדיין עם הרשויות לא יתקרבו למקום הזה, ומי שכן נמצאים בקשר ומחויבים ואכפת להם, אוקיי? ההשפעה היא מאוד מאוד מוגבלת, ואנחנו אמרנו שאנחנו צריכים למצוא דרך שלישית, איכשהו דרך שמגשרת על הפער הגדול הזה. אוקיי, אז כדי להצליח להביא, אנחנו אמרנו אנחנו צריכים ליצור רשת תמיכה לקהילת וואלג'ה שתקדם את הדרישה לתכנון ולתכנון הוגן, וברשת הזו אנחנו צריכים שיהיו גורמים בעלי השפעה, אוקיי? איך אנחנו מביאים אותם? אז השתמשנו בכמה דברים. דבר ראשון, התבססנו על קשרים אישיים, ולא על טיעונים פוליטיים או מוסריים, כדי להיפגש עם אנשים שרצינו, עם גורמים שרצינו, להביא אותם לכפר. בהיבט הזה, קבוצה בשם ידידי וואלג'ה ממלאת תפקיד מרכזי, אני עוד מעט ארחיב עליה. התמקדנו בהיבט ההומניטרי, העוול של הריסות הבתים, כשאין כל אפשרות לבנות בהיתר. זאת אומרת, לא נכנסנו לשאלות של כיבוש, שתי מדינות, התנחלויות, זה לא חלק מהשיח במקרה הזה, והסברנו את האינטרס הישראלי בהסדרה תכנונית, כן, זה שההריסות כשלעצמן לא ימנעו המשך בנייה, זה שלישראל יש מספיק משברים, שוב פעם אפשר להגיד ח'אן אל-אחמר, היא לא צריכה עוד אחד. עכשיו, חסר לי פה דף? אוקיי. השימוש הזה בקשרים אישיים, כן, חסר פה דף. רגע, סליחה. השימוש הזה בקשרים אישיים נעלמה לי, דווקא החלק על ידידי וואלג'ה נעלם. מדהים. כתבתי הרבה. לא חושבת שכתבתי כך הרבה. אוקיי. זה המדע. טוב. אז על הקבוצה הזו, כן? ידידי וואלג'ה זה פשוט תושבים מערב ירושלים, תושבים ותושבות, אנשים מהשורה, לא אנשים שיש להם איזושהי מומחיות מקצועית, איזשהם, אני יודע מה, כישורים מיוחדים, גם לא אקטיביסטים כאלה ואחרים, אנשים שבעיקר על רקע אישי לפעמים בגלל הידע החקלאי בכפר, לפעמים מסיבות אחרות, היה להם קשר עם הכפר והם החליטו שעל הדבר הזה הם מתארגנים ופועלים ביחד והם באמת שיחקו תפקיד מאוד מאוד חשוב. המעורבות שלהם, הנוכחות שלהם, אני חושב שאפשר לציין 3 תפקידים. אחד, הם לוקחים את הסיטואציה המאוד מאוד פוליטית הזאת, המאוד מאוד מקוטבת, והופכים אותה למשהו הרבה יותר ענייני, אוקיי? כאילו לא פוליטי. מנטרלים במידה מסוימת את הפוליטיות של העניין. ובדיעבד אני יכול להגיד, כל האדבוקציה שעשינו עד היום היא מצריכה אינסוף עבודה. להביא את מי שהרבה פעמים לא רוצה או לא מתעניין, לשכנע, להידבר. אני לא יודע כמה מאות או אלפי שעות הושקעו בדבר הזה. זה לא דבר ששתי עמותות יכולות לעשות בכוחות עצמן. אז מסקנה אחת שלי לפחות, מאיפה שאנחנו היום, זה שמצד אחד כל המהלך הזה לא יכול היה לקרות בלי העמותות ירמים ובמקום, כן? גם בגלל ההבנה המקצועית, ההבנה התכנונית, גם בגלל ההבנה של אסטרטגיה ושל אדבוקציה, אבל כאמור, עבודה של עמותות בכלים מקצועיים ובלי מעורבות של שחקנים נוספים, ובמיוחד בלי מעורבות grassroots, היא דבר שהוא לא מספיק יעיל, בוודאי לא במציאות שלנו. אז איך זה עבד? הרשת תמיכה הזו שנבנתה, שכללה או הגענו אל ורתמנו אנשי מקצוע, אקדמיים, אנשים בעלי שם, גם מבחינה ציבורית, גם בעולם התכנון, אנשים שמדברים עם הרשויות, אפילו בעלי תפקידים וכך הלאה. אז כמה דברים שהרשת הזאת ידעה לעשות. אחד, מבחינת הידע המקצועי, אחד מאנשי המקצוע שהצטרף למאמצים, זיהה את הטיעונים התכנוניים שאותם אנחנו צריכים לפתח כדי לשנות את עמדת המערכת, וכאן אני צריך אולי רגע שוב להדגיש, מבחינת המדינה אין מה לדבר על תכנון בוואלג'ה, בסדר? זה אמור להיות שטח ירוק, זה אמור להיות פארק, אז מה אנחנו בכלל מנסים לתכנן? אותו אדם זיהה שם איזושהי דרך לעבוד, ואני חושב שזה לא רק לצורך העניין המקצוענות שלו שקיימת גם בבמקום, אלא בתור בן אדם שמדבר עם המערכת, שמכיר את המערכת, הוא הבין משהו שאנחנו כגופים יותר ביקורתיים, היה לנו יותר קשה לזהות. אוקיי? האתגר שם גם בשבילנו היה האם לסמוך על שיקול הדעת שלו, או להגיד שבגלל שהוא מכיר את המערכת הוא אולי נאיבי מדי, והוא לא מבין. הוא הבין איך אפשר לעבוד עם הדרישה הסביבתית, כן, וואלג'ה צריכה להיות פארק, היא לא שכונה, היא לא כפר, היא צריכה להיות פארק. אנחנו היינו בגישה של, אוקיי, על הדבר הזה צריך להראות כמה הוא לא צודק, כמה הוא לא נכון, כמה הוא לא ענייני, והוא אמר לא, אנחנו נלך עם זה ונראה שאפשר גם וגם. אוקיי? אוקיי, פעם הבאה צריך לשדך את הדפים. סליחה? 5 דקות, מעולה. 5 דקות זה לסדר את הדפים, ואז... טוב, הדבר השני זה הקשרים האישיים, שבאמת, שוב פעם, ברגע שמעורבת קבוצה של אנשים מקומיים, והם ישראלים, הם האזרחים, הם הצד החזק, כל אחד מכיר עוד אנשים, שוב פעם, אנשים שלא בהכרח היו נגישים לנו, כשלכל אחד מאיתנו יש, ובוודאי כארגונים, יש לנו עשרות שנים של ידע והיכרות, ואנחנו מכירים, עדיין הרשת הזו הייתה מאוד מאוד משמעותית בלהגיע על בסיס קשרים אישיים לאנשים שלא היה לנו שום סיכוי להגיע אליהם לבד. דוגמה אחת זה חבר כנסת מהימין, דוגמה אחרת זה בעל תפקיד מאוד מאוד בכיר, שאפילו אפשר להגיד שיש לו אחריות ישירה למה שמתרחש בוואלג'ה. וכמובן, זה דבר אחד להגיע, זה דבר אחר באמת לרתום ולקבל את העזרה, אז אחד מהם מעורב בצורה מאוד מאוד עמוקה במתרחש.
יש שמות? אפשר שמות?
נשמור לעצמנו. דרך אגב, עוד אחד מהמאפיינים זה שבאמת בניגוד למה שאנחנו רגילים, או לפחות מה שאני רגיל בתור מי שעובד בעיר עמים, חלק מאוד גדול מהעבודה הוא נעשה מתחת לרדאר, הוא נעשה מאחורי הקלעים, כלומר הכלים הזמינים והכי נגישים של מחאה, של קמפיין וכך הלאה, צריך לחשוב טוב טוב מתי להשתמש בהם, מתי לא להשתמש בהם וכך הלאה. התוצאה של כל המאמצים האלה זה שלפני קצת יותר משנה, במרץ 2022, קרה הדבר הלא יאמן. אולי רגע אני גם אגיד, זה לא שוויתרנו על כלים של מחאה וגם לא על כלים של לחץ בינלאומי. היה למשל מכתב של 200 רבנים ורבניות יהודים מארצות הברית לממשלה, היה פנייה של 50 חברי קונגרס, גם לממשלת ישראל, גם לשר החוץ האמריקאי, כלומר היה גם את הלחץ הבינלאומי. ואז לפני שנה, על רקע הלחצים הבינלאומיים האלה, אמור להתקיים דיון מכריע בבית המשפט בשאלה, ומההבנה שלי, או אני לא אגיד מההבנה, ממה שאנחנו יודעים, זה שאם היה מדובר אך ורק בלחץ בינלאומי, מה שהממשלה הייתה עושה, זה הייתה מבקשת דחייה של הדיון בבית המשפט. בוא נדחה את זה, בעוד חצי שנה יהיה פחות לחץ. בגלל העבודה המקומית, בגלל היכולת לייצר את הרשת הזאת, כשהנושא נדרשו אליו, היו את האנשים בפנים שאמרו לא, צריך לא לדחות, צריך לפתור את הבעיה, אפשר לפתור את הבעיה, זה לטובתנו, ואז בעצם המדינה מגיעה לבית המשפט ואומרת, אנחנו בעצם תומכים בהמשך ההקפאה של צווי הריסה, כדי שקהילת וואלג'ה תוכל להגיש תוכנית, להכין תוכנית ולהגיש אותה, אחרי כאמור כל אותן שנים, אפשר להגיד עשרות שנים, שהמדינה אומרת זה פארק, זה פארק, זה צריך להיות פארק, זה יהיה פארק, אנחנו מוכנים לשקול תכנון, אוקיי? וזה נגיד ההישג הגדול, הוא גם חזר על עצמו שוב, כי היו צריך להאריך שוב פעם את ההקפאה, זה כבר הופכת להיות לאיזושהי עמדה עקבית של המדינה, ששוב, לטעמי לפחות, באמת הושגה אך ורק בגלל היכולת הזו, כן, לא לעבוד בצורה הרגילה שאנחנו למרבית הצער בדרך כלל נאלצים, לא משאירים לנו ברירה אלא לעבוד בה. וכמו ששרי תיארה, ממש עכשיו הוגשה התוכנית, הדרך היא עוד סופר סופר ארוכה, ואני רוצה להציג לסיום כמה דילמות, ומשהו שאנחנו מאוד מודעים לו, שהוא גם רלוונטי לדילמות, זה שהצלחנו ואנחנו באמת, מילא אנחנו גאים, אנשים בכפר, כאילו מאוד 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 שמחים, מרוצים, לא יודע איזה מילה להגיד, על המצב. שום דבר עוד לא בטוח. אפשר יהיה עוד להכשיל את התוכנית, אפשר יהיה לא לאשר אותה באלף ואחת דרכים, אפשר יהיה לשים לנו מכשולים והתוכנית לא תאושר. אז הדילמות. כשנגיד בעיר עמים צייצו, נדמה לי שזה היה בטוויטר, וסיפרו על ההצלחה הזו, הנה המדינה שינתה את עמדתה, אז פעיל BDS, ככה אדם די רציני בתנועת ה-BDS, הגיב בחזרה, סתם עלי תאנה של עוד ארגון ציוני. אוקיי? עכשיו, מצד אחד, הביקורת הזאת, הביקורת שלו, היא לא באמת רצינית במובן הזה של, אתה לא יודע מה החיים שלך, לא היית יום אחד בוואלג'ה, לא עשית שום דבר בשביל הדבר הזה. מצד שני, אני אהיה הראשון להודות שלא משנה ההצלחה הכי טובה שאני יכול לדמיין בוואלג'ה, בוודאי לא תגמור את הכיבוש, היא גם לא תגמור את מדיניות האפליה בתכנון, ובזמן שאנחנו נאבקים להציל בתים בוואלג'ה, נהרסים מסביב במזרח ירושלים, כן, אם זה מאז 2016, אני לצערי יודע את המספר יותר מדי טוב, כן, זה כמעט 1,000 דירות במקומות אחרים. אז מה עושים עם זה? הדבר השני זה באמת הכותרת הזו שנתתי, האם יש תכנון, האם יש תכנון הוגן עם כיבוש, מה שחלק מאיתנו צועקים היום בהפגנות, שאין דמוקרטיה עם כיבוש, אז אם אין דמוקרטיה עם כיבוש, מה אתה בכלל מנסה להשיג תוכנית מתאר? ובשיא הזה של המאמץ של לשנות את עמדת המדינה, היה ביקור בוואלג'ה של פעילים של חד"ש, של חברי כנסת, ואנחנו רצינו בשביל הקמפיין, ביקשתי לצלם את חברי הכנסת בווידאו קצר שהם אומרים, צריך לעשות תוכנית מתאר לוואלג'ה, ועאידה תומא סלימאן מסתכלת עליי ככה, תוקעת בי כזה מבט, מה תוכנית מתאר? זה כיבוש, אוקיי? ולקח לה, כן, חצי דקה, לא אלינו צריכים להתווכח, היא מיד סדרה ומצאה איך להגיד את מה שהיא רוצה בצורה שגם ישרת את מה שאנחנו היינו צריכים, אבל כאמור, מי יודע אם התוכנית תאושר? בעצם אנחנו עכשיו העברנו את הנטל אל הקהילה של הכפר, היא אמורה להכין תוכנית, המון מאמצים, וזה הדבר האחרון שאני רוצה להגיד. גם, נגיד אם אני מסתכל עלינו, או רק עליי, כן, אבל את תגידי, בדיוק, את תגידי איך את רואה את זה. המחנה שנאבק בכיבוש, בין אם זה מפלגת חד"ש כדוגמה, בין אם זה תנועת ה-BDS כדוגמה, אנחנו לוקחים איזשהו צעד ומתרחקים, אולי לא מתרחקים, בוודאי לא אידיאולוגית, אבל הם לא שותפים לעשייה הזו, הם לא כל כך יכולים להועיל בעשייה הזו, ואנחנו בוחרים איזשהו דרך עבודה שהיא לא מתכתבת עם אסטרטגיות של המחנה שאני מרגיש שייך אליו, ומילא, לא יודע מה, הבטן שלי שמתהפכת שם, מה זה עושה לקהילה של הכפר, אוקיי? כי בעצם הכפר, כשאנחנו, וזה לא אנחנו, כל ההחלטות הנציגים של הכפר קיבלו, הם החליטו איך לפעול. כשהם בחרו בדרך הזו, הם בעצם נכנסים לקוראלס של מערכת התכנון הישראלית, עם כל מה שאנחנו יודעים עליה, שצדק זה הדבר האחרון שקשור לשם. אז רק כדי לקצר, ואפשר פה לפרט על זה עוד המון, אבל במקרה הכי גרוע, worst case scenario, המהלך נכשל, או המהלך קורה בצורה כזו שאנשים בתוך הכפר, שיש פיצול בתוך הכפר, שיש אנשים שנורא כועסים, ושכל הכעס והתסכול שלהם מופנה, לא אלינו, אנחנו לא חשובים כאן, מופנה אל הנציגים שלהם שנרתמו ושעשו ושמקדישים באמת בשנים האחרונות ימים כלילות, כדי להגן על הבתים שלהם. אוקיי? אז שוב, אנחנו בחרנו לפעול ככה, ואני סיפרתי גם על הישגים, אבל לא רוצה להתעלם מהדילמות האלה. תודה.
Thanks for all the speakers for engaging presentations. We have some time for questions and comments. So, Chagit, Einat, and then Liora. We'll start with.
Thank you so much for this incredible panel. I'm really happy that we could hear you all together. It's a multi-dimensional perspective. And I was thinking through the things that you've said. I think both the presentations by Michal and Sari were very convincing, but also when Aviv comes and says, well, let's put it on the table. It's not a planning problem. It's a political problem. It's a super important, I think, point of departure to think about what we're doing here, how we're thinking about this whole thing. And so when I'm listening to what you have been presenting, I was thinking about, for example, what Michal said about this whole reparative perspective depends on civil society that takes the victim-oriented approach. And I'm trying to think about, when I was listening to you, I was thinking about a sort of a typology of roles. Because I was wondering, and this is one of my questions, whether the victim is only a victim, or maybe when we're doing this kind of work that you're doing in planning, and also Aviv, you described the work in the context of agriculture. Even you can say urban agriculture, because they are included inside the city, which is super relevant to our days, our time. Can these victims become also experts? And I think that this is a really interesting perspective to think of the kind of knowledges that you produce, which is, you can say, a co-production of knowledge, and how we can basically think about these planning processes and planning practices as a sort of planning citizenship. And so in a way, thinking about this knowledge together with the political work that you're doing is bringing together these two dimensions of planning and of political work. So I think it's important to think about it. And in terms of roles, when you talk about Ari Cohen and you talk about Ayala Ronel, and I'm super curious to hear from you how you define this role. You say it's this particular, plan that came and was able, and what does this personality or an expert, what does he or she consist of? Trying to kind of define that. And I'll finish with that.
Thank you. So thank you for 3 excellent presentations, and very interesting, and I agree they portray a very interesting picture together. But I actually want to focus about, I think, the question of where is it human rights and where is it transitional justice, and where do these two notions conflict, and whether they can live together. Because it seems as if work that has been presented here, maybe by the 2 organizations, is actually planning rights, and which is an issue of human rights, and you do that very successfully, as much as you can successfully under the current circumstances, and we appreciate your work. But at the same time, I think it's not necessarily actions of transitional justice in the deep meaning of the term of recognition by someone, not only recognition of some kind of process, even within conflict, of documentation or various aspects that you can see of transitional justice. So I'm wondering whether it's a right action or really you see the connection to transitional justice. And I think that David very illuminating, in a very illuminating way, showed us actually the tension between the two in his final remarks. That once you pursue rights, particularly within an occupied territory, you actually normalize the occupation. So, and I think this is a true tension that all of us are dealing with. So on the one hand, you say, okay, I don't want to pursue rights because rights within East Jerusalem, legal rights, but we're going to talk from the clinic about having status or planning rights or any other rights, is actually what it does is deepen and normalize the occupation and give legitimacy to the municipality or to the occupier in the occupation. So I'm wondering where this takes you.
Thank you. I learned a lot. It was a wonderful time. Thank you. But I want to push you more because I'm teaching transitional justice in Tel Aviv University, and a lot of the students today are interested in climate change and in justice in meaning of climate, and the main obstacle for these rights, transition, is the national park. When you all put it as, this is just the limitation, this is the oppression, don't look at it as something. And I'm pushing you to think, I know what the aim of this is, but maybe we can challenge the understanding of what is a power from a native perspective, and what is the role and the tensions between climate justice or rights of the, and even more generally, is it the right way today to just talk about individual rights or even communities' rights? Or should we expand it to nature's rights? To what do we do with it? I think you are sitting on this junction, but this is the big elephant we don't talk about. I would love to hear the ways you would articulate it, think about it.
Is it a quick question? Because we only have
לא שאלה, אני לא הולכת לשאול שאלה.
תגובה?
לא צריך. תודה רבה. אני במקרה גרה בבית ג'אלה, אז אני עובדת כל יום בוואנג'ה. אני חושבת שבנוסף לכל מה שנאמר, מה שקורה בימים האחרונים, ממש בימים האחרונים, מעתיקים את מחסום וואנג'ה, שהוא למטה ליד גן החיות, ומכניסים אלפי דונמים לתוך מה שנקרא ירושלים, גן, whatever. ואני חושבת שזה עבר את הגבול של הזכות לקיום בית ולחיות בתוך בית מהשטח ההיסטורי, אלא זה עובר לזה שהסיבה היחידה שאני יכולה להבין אותה, שפשוט למנוע פלסטינים בכלל להגיע עד לעין חניה, שזה המפלט היחידי הירוק שהם יכולים לנפוש בו, לנשום קצת אוויר, להיות מתחת לעץ ירוק בסביבה שקטה, לבלות עם המשפחה ועם הילדים בשקט ובשלום ובלי לגרום לאף אחד שום הפרעה, לא מפריעים לאף אחד אם מישהו מנסה להגיד כן מפריעים, אלא פשוט למנוע אותם להגיע לשם. אז הדרך היחידה זה להעביר את המחסום למעלה, ומה שאומר בימים האחרונים. הם פשוט התחילו לפני שנתיים, לא היה להם תקציב, עכשיו יש כנראה תקציב, ומה שמקומם שהשלט כתוב עליו העתקה. just copying, העתקה, הם לא עושים שום דבר, רק מעתיקים את המחסום. זה מקומם, אנחנו דיברנו עם עיתונאות, עם חבר כנסת, אחמד טיבי, אני לא יודעת מה אפשר לעשות, אבל זה כל יום שאני עוברת משם ורואה אנשים שעובדים ואומרת זהו, המציאות, אנחנו נתרגל בעוד מציאות, מפלה, עוד מציאות לא צודקת, עוד מציאות שפשוט מציקה לאנשים תמימים שרוצים פשוט לנשום אוויר. וזהו, וזה מקומם בצורה שהיא עוברת את הגבול של עד כמה אפשר להתעולל בתושבים ובאנשים. זהו, אין לי שאלה.
We started a bit late, so is it okay if we take 5 minutes?
כן, הבעיה שלי זה לא אם לזכור, אלא מה אני אומר. זה בסדר לנו, תשובות יהיו מאוד מאוד חלקיות. אני חושב שכל אחת מהשאלות האלה באמת שווה עכשיו לקחת להמשיך ולעבוד איתה. אוקיי. אני מודה, המושג של צדק מעברי זה לא מושג שאני בדיוק מבין אותו יותר מדי. אז אני לא בטוח שאני יכול להתייחס בהיבט של ההכרה. הקשר שלי עם אנשים בוואלג'ה הוא גם קשר ארוך שנים, והוא רוב השנים היה סביב, כן היה מאוד מאוד קשור להשתלטות הזאת על האדמות, אבל בגלל שהייתה בעצימות נמוכה, אז איכשהו הקשר שלי היה סביב דברים שלא מאוד עניינו את הרשויות הישראליות, כלומר לא היה איזה פושבק מאוד רציני, ושם באמת, לטעמי לפחות, היה תהליך מאוד משמעותי של להיווכח בכוחות של אנשים בוואלג'ה, של הקהילה בוואלג'ה, מאוד מאוד סביב החקלאות, וגם מצד אחד לתמוך בזה לא ממקום של להגן על הקורבנות, אלא לאפשר למשהו מאוד מאוד חשוב להתקיים ולהתפתח, ובעצם דברים שישראלים יכולים ללמוד מזה, כלומר באמת מי שהיו בעלי הידע ובעלי היכולת, זו הקהילה החקלאית של וואלג'ה. אז אני מאוד, עם הכיוון מחשבה הזה, אני מאוד מאוד מזדהה. היה מאוד, אני חושב, באיזושהי סיטואציה, אני יודע מה, לא דקנית, זה נכון מאוד מאוד לשאלה של התכנון, בין אם אנחנו באמת מדברים על משבר אקלים ואיך חיים בעיר יכולים להיראות. גם באמת וואלג'ה משמרת גם ברמה של כל המרחב הזה של ירושלים, צורת חיים שפעם הייתה כאן מאוד ולא נשאר ממנה כלום.
אבל יש בזה ביטוי שהתחילו לחשוב על מורשת תרבות,
בדיוק.
על הטבע כמורשת תרבות.
בדיוק, אז הנה שרי גם תגיד את זה, אבל בדיוק על מה שאת אומרת, זה יכול היה להיות מאוד מאוד הדבר של וואלג'ה. בשביל זה אבל צריך שמי שקובעים למי הם רוצים להקשיב ולמי הם לא רוצים להקשיב, יגידו את זה. הדבר האחרון שאני אגיד לפני שאני מעביר לשרי, זה בא נגיד תסריט הכי אופטימי, הרשת הזו שבנינו, שכוללת היום אנשים שמצד אחד כן הם בעלי כוח נקרא לזה, ועד כה בעבר לא בכלל הכירו את וואלג'ה, אולי הם יכולים להמשיך עם זה גם הלאה, אבל אז באמת, כמו שאת או מי שחתמה, צריך לצאת מהמחשבה רק על הקורבנות, כלומר על הפגיעות בהם, עליהם כקורבנות, ולהבין שיש כאן דברים מאוד מאוד יקרים ובעלי. כן, את צודקת.
סתם זו הייתה שאלה.
כן.
So I'm going to switch back into English. All the questions are very good questions. We have 15 minutes, we say certain things and don't say the others, and then we hope you'll ask the questions about what we didn't say. So thank you for that. Just quickly, first of all, I think that in terms of transforming victims into experts, I think this is a very interesting way of saying what we feel we've been doing in Qom. Luckily, so we and Wallach are really good examples, but there are other places where this is happening at different rates and it's in ways that are right for each community. But in general, first of all, in East Jerusalem, I think part of it is by coercion, that is to say that, Aviv says this a lot, that you and I live with a roof over our heads and we take that for granted, and so we don't have to know about the planning and the plans in our neighborhood unless we're interested, as individuals. But in East Jerusalem, every resident becomes an expert in planning because they have no choice. You need at least one like this in every home or in every other home because of first of all, because of the demolition order that arrived or might arrive. And then there are individuals within the community who really become experts. And because of the long-term connections that Aviv is talking with, we are lucky to work in each community with these experts who are already their own agents, meaning we learn from them as much as they learn from us. And so it's really about working with these experts, and a piece of this is also the role of the planner. And I don't know really to define this, but I will say that Part of it is people who can build real trust with the communities. And so the two examples I gave are really those kind of individuals. And also a certain amount of ideology. We can't put that aside.
And power in the institutions, in the dominant institutions.
Well, I don't know if it's power as much as credit and just experience. And often this is what we will, when communities ask us for recommendations, we will say, look into what have they been able to do, what have they done in the past. So it's experience and credit, acknowledgement, and also just knowing the ins and outs of the system. In terms of this question about human rights and transitional justice, like Aviv, I'm not an expert in transitional justice. I feel more in my at home when I talk about human rights, but I do want to emphasize two terms. One term is a planning term that we use, is planning recognition. Hasdarat tiknunim. So I think that this connects the two worlds, and there are different types of recognition. Like I tried to say, the ends of the spectrum. So the recognition in Walid is the very basic recognition of a place. Recognition that this place exists. And we there was never arguments about whether the place exists or not. There are, on the outskirts, questions about recognition of how big the place should be, right? Certain homes get left out of the plan, so they're not recognized. But then there's regularization, which is another form of recognition, and this is the ability to live in a home that is considered legal. So these are, in your terms, I think these 3 steps of transitional justice in urban planning terms, even though, yes, we are working in the arena of human rights. And I am not going to talk about deepening and normalizing the occupation because Aviv did that very well. And it's just, I think, I don't think it really adds that much to something new to the discussion because it's been talked about so much. And personally, I'm not so interested in deepening or normalizing it because how much deeper can it get? So, and just in terms of climate change, or climate justice, and for us at BIMCOM, I admit it's new terminology similar to transitional justice. So we are one step running after the academia, but we're learning a lot from you. Certainly, we could have given a whole lecture about national parks in the city, their scale, their use, what are they really for, what are they giving to the city, etc. In the context of Jerusalem, this is a very, very big question. And I do want to say that 2 things. First of all, one thing that I'm very concerned about is, people talk about climate change, but don't enough talk about demolitions of homes. People are so concerned. So first of all, this triangle, right, of society, nature, and I don't know what's the third, the financing, or but you go to Walid, it's such a special place. It's so serene, and then every few steps you have a pile of rubble. The effect of this demolition on the climate is huge, and I think not yet thought of enough. And another thing also about Walid is that I did want to point out that in the process of the planning, what Aviv talked about, how we tried to talk in the language of the institutions in order to get their attention, we began to use terms like biosphere and Nof Tarbut in Hebrew, which is landscape heritage, and thinking about Walid in these terms is definitely part of the project at large. Perhaps less part of the statutory planning because it has a very, very clear motivation of bringing the recognition, but in terms of the project at large and all of the support and how we think about it, how the residents begin to think about it, although you can't really expect them to think about it so much because they are living it. They are the ones who allow us to to think about it in these terms because this is their day-to-day life. But these have definitely been terms that have entered our process, and they're present.
Can I just comment a little bit on your point, Sally?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, it's because there's one of the points that you said about, I think it's loud that we speak in English. No?
It's recorded. That's why you said.
Okay. It's something like you said about the experience from the community and that people have they are experts in planning. I want to differentiate this, and this is about their experience of the consequences of the planning. They are just more about the results of what's happening for them. They are not really experienced, they are experts in the planning itself or to changing in the planning of the system of planning. So it should be really just, there's several professionals maybe that they are working, but they are not enough also because it's that's all the planning system, and they're not really experts how to deal with the planning system. They could deal maybe for demolition and just to delay something like this. It's just more the consequences of it. So I just want to put this out because I'm as a Palestinian also and resident of Eastern Jerusalem that I like also the terminology. It's really tough to find professionals to work on the system of planning. So it's something I would just to mention. And thanks for your comments. Final comments.
Okay.
Wrap it all up.
Okay. So I'll say just a few words. I was really anxious about using the victim title. And I would normally not use it. It comes from transitional justice language, and that's why I did use it.
Which is very criticized, even in transitional justice.
Yeah, and I was completely wondering about it, and again, I don't think it's the best framing. I do think we need to think about it in terms of co-production and in terms of agency, and I think the planner's agency is very important. We can talk about that more also. But I think if we stay just with the rights discussion, we're limited. And I think that's what transitional justice has to add here. So for me, really the question is how do we move, create some sort of conditions where, some political transformation is possible, because we understand it's not, these processes are going two ways, okay? So it's not just that, okay, one day we'll have this wonderful political arena, and then we can begin fixing all the wrong things. It doesn't work like that, right? So we have to start fixing whatever we can fix right now. And this will, hopefully at least, or it is part of moving the process along. So I think really that's, and in this sense I completely agree, planning is a much wider field than just technical or just expertise. It has this recognition, it has the capacity to move, to mobilize people. And I think that's the great power of it. We'll stop here.
Can you say a word about that?
Yeah, I agree with the distinction that you made. I think it's very important that not everybody can be an expert, not everybody should be an expert, not everybody wants to be an expert. However, I think if we talk about public engagement in the deep sense of it, we need to find some sort of language to explain planning in a way where people can engage with it. And the second thing is, again, that experts are really missing, and this is part of building, Palestinian society within Jerusalem is also building a cohort of experts, which is Ta'ah, which is what we're doing at the clinic, and in different initiatives, and students coming into the Hebrew University, and there's wider discussion about these.
Watch that this is under severe criticism from the Palestinian side.
And this is also
being,
right. And everything here, I assume that I'm going to get criticized for everything I say about Jerusalem, so I just take that as a...
Thank you so much for all the speakers and you for that.
Thank you.